Today I'm going to be ranking 17 Adept Cosmetics eyeshadow palettes. I've tried many eyeshadow palettes from them over the years, and I thought I would finally do a palette ranking video. I don't think I've ever done one, and I'm going to be including just all the palettes that I own from them. Now, there are a couple of palettes that I have decluttered, which are not going to be included in this ranking, so I think you can kind of assume that those would be on the bottom, and those are the Oden palette, as well as the two Emunit new palettes, the original and the remastered as well. I don't have those. I actually think I've tried almost all of their palettes with the exception of the, I think it was something Archer. It had a lot of greens in it, and that one was super limited edition. Pretty good experience with their different matte formulas over the years, shimmer formulas as well. So let's jump right into it. And none of these palettes are bad. It's really going to come down hugely to color story as well as shimmers and the textures that are in the shimmers. Do I like them? Are they squishy? Etc, etc. So let's jump into it because there's a lot to get through. So in 17th place, I have the House of Elle palette, which is a 9-pan palette. This was their first and last 9-pan palette that they came out with, which I wish they did more of these because I think it's really fun to do a little curated color story. And most of their palettes do have some sort of a connection to Star Trek. This one especially in particular, I'm not really familiar with Star Trek, so I can't tell you about color stories and matching the theme. So this is an older palette, so this has their older formulation, especially with their mattes, which I wasn't the biggest fan of the mattes, which is why this one is ranking so low. And there is one shade though that is like a legendary shade called Zor-El. I absolutely love this multi-chrome shade. So because of all those things together, that's why it is in the bottom. I do really still love this packaging, especially because it's like a beautiful, almost like an indigo leaning blue purple with orange, and it's just really nice and simple and sleek. And this is when they were doing their fall leather packaging. So in 16th place is the Beaute palette. This one has beautiful lace packaging with a sparkly texture below it, and this one is really just a color story. I feel like it's a little bit tricky. We've got a lot of just like bright shades. So the bright green, the bright pink, the blue, and then this shade kind of just really felt misplaced in this palette. I don't really feel like it fits in here. I would have rather this one would have been at least switched out. I do really like the shimmers in here. None of these were overly squishy or anything like that. And this is definitely their newer shimmer formula that I very much enjoy, and I especially really liked its swab because it is such a beautiful neutral with silvery flecks throughout it, while Belle Maroon was super smooth, maybe a little bit more leaning satin, but I feel like it was a nice variation. There's some multi-chromes. I don't really think to use this palette because of the color story, but I would definitely dip into some of the shimmers in here. In 15th place is the Seahorse palette, which they're actually going to be redoing this palette and relaunching it, and I believe it's going to have mattes in it, but this one didn't, and this one was also the priciest palette that they ever launched. I believe it was at least like $125, if not more, and they launched it with quite a bit of a, I think it was like 20 to 25% off discount code because people were not happy with how expensive it is. Obviously, it's all shimmers and there's plenty of multi-chrome, shifty shades, etc, etc. However, I felt like the value just wasn't there for me for this palette. Some of the shades are just really kind of harder to use because they're super flaky. These two shades were really similar. I just wasn't really impressed with this palette in particular. It just didn't live up to the expectation that I kind of made for them in my head based on the price tag. I think going into anything that has a really higher price tag, especially when a brand doesn't usually do that, you're really more likely to set certain expectations for said product to really see if it is worth that extra money, again, especially from said brand. That being said, if the price of the palette was less, I would still rank it a little bit lower because overall it's just not my preference. I don't love really flaky shadows, and there isn't much of a color story, which is totally understandable. And all shimmer palette is usually like, I don't expect those to have a really thought out color story because it's shimmer, so they tend to really work together, and also you are going to be pulling other mattes from other palettes or singles with it, so that's not really like the bigger deal here. In 14th place is the Minka palette. This is the original palette. They have relaunched this year actually, and this is like a more neutral kind of color story, specifically when it comes to the shimmers. I wasn't a huge fan of the mattes. They were okay. This was before they amped up their mattes a little bit more. The stars of the show were really these shimmers up here. However, I did find these to crease a bit, and they were definitely a little bit harder to use because they had almost like a little bit of a grittiness to them, and they're super, super chunky, and I definitely have a lot of fallout with those. So I do prefer the newer version much more, and it's also a larger palette, and I feel like it has much more of a color story as well. But I do really like these two smoother shades in here. I think they're really nice, and this was just such a beautiful holochrome. It's super, super shifty and very holographic without being gray. So I feel like that was like a huge success for them that I was definitely excited to see more in their future palette. But overall, when I reached for this palette, I feel like it was definitely a little bit more of a hassle to use than I would like it to be. So that's why it's ranking much lower. It's really just all those things kind of together. And in 13th place is the Cyborg Choir palette. This one was another one of the palettes that had a Star Trek theme, and I love the packaging of this. I really do very much enjoy the fall leather. I think it's such a great look, and it's just nice and sleek and simple, and I can spot them from my collection really easily. And this one is in 13th place because really mostly the color story, and also there's a lot of chunky shades in here. And there's one holochrome right here where I felt like the holo was unevenly dispersed, and I wasn't the biggest fan of that personally. So it really comes down to the texture and the color story with this palette, since I have to decide which palette I like better. And also, do I think to reach for this palette? Is this something I'm going to think in the morning at 6:30 a.m. when I'm getting ready for work? Am I going to be like, I want to use the Adept Cosmetics Cyborg palette? And also some of the shimmers in here are squishy, so it just does deter me just a little bit, especially if I'm getting ready for work in the morning. Do I want to put on an eyeshadow that might potentially crease in the 12-hour day that I'm about to have? I do remember having an issue with this shade just really not wanting to build up. It was really thin and almost translucent, and it did not want to build up. But I do prefer this color story to the other four palettes. I feel like this one feels a little bit more cohesive to me because we have the blue, the burgundy, the purple, and then the pop of the neon yellow. And I think all of them also really nicely complement the shimmers and the colors of the shimmers. So I do think you could get quite a bit of a variety of looks with that palette because it is pretty colorful. And then in 12th place is the Heather Austin palette. Now this one is mostly here because it is the older matte formula, and also a few of the shimmers were emollient and squishy and gave me quite a bit of creasings. I really like the shades in here, from the mattes, the super grungy mattes, to the shimmers. I think it's a nice pairing, and some of the shades were really standout kind of shades, like for example So Excited, 0603, Video Chat I really liked a lot, and Smith is just a really beautiful kind of slightly darker base multi-chrome. It's super, super shifty, so I really liked the colors in here. I just wasn't the biggest fan of the formulations in here, because I do have hooded oily lids, and the mattes were just not as good. They worked fine, but they were just not my favorite back then. I think that they have improved the mattes so much more in the past year or so, actually maybe a little bit longer than that. And in 11th place is the Sumerian Sunset palette, and this one, I love this color story. I think this is such a beautiful color story, and when I first saw it, I was really, really, really excited for it, especially for the shimmers. For example, Packlet, Lel, USS Defiant. I was super, super excited for these because they are just very unique and really punchy and beautiful shifty shades. And this palette does have a variety of different textures in here. I was not a biggest fan of Obsidian Order and Praxis. One, I feel like they were a little too similar, and also they were almost pasty. They spread out like paste, like you had a cream shadow from a tube basically, which immediately made me think I was going to have creasing issues with them. As well as USS Defiant, this one was pretty squishy in the pan and almost kind of sticky, and so was Packlet, and I remember talking about that in the video, and I was really caught off guard as to why they feel kind of sticky when you press them. They just have that little kind of like tug. If I took them out of the palette and I put them on the table and I was to tap my finger in them, it would stick to my finger a little bit, and that just means it's gonna immediately crease on me, unfortunately. And I was so excited for USS Defiant, especially because it is so fiery. So I love this color story, but I do feel a little bit restricted on how I'm using the shimmers. That being said, these three shades are really nice. They feel a little bit more like they're sparkly and they're smooth, but they're not overly squishy or sticky. I feel like once I actually use the palette, I kind of felt like I wish some of these were different because they're overall pretty light, especially these two shades. I would have loved to have seen a much more deeper matte in here. Maybe if this one had been darker or this one, but I do really like this orange in here. I just think it goes really well with a lot of the shades in here. But when I open this palette, I still do get really excited about the shimmers because I feel like some of these were really unique, especially back when they came out. And I feel like even to this day, I'm not really sure if I can quite dupe this shade. I really don't think I can. And even this one, it has just like a certain like fiery glowiness to it, even though it just looks like it's orange. It has like, I don't know, like a reddish vibe to it as well. But overall, I just couldn't rank this any higher, mostly because of the shades being so squishy and the mattes, again, needing needing just a little bit more variety with the mattes. So then in 10th place is the Element 115. This one has a little alien on it. Again, love this fall leather vibe, and this kind of feels very like emblem-y. It feels very high-end, and I just really like that, and it feels like nice and heavy. The mirror is really nice overall in all the palettes, and this one I really like because it's colorful. I love these kinds of colors in general. I love me blues and purples. A couple of the shades were just a little bit kind of squishy, but overall some of these are just super sparkly and really beautiful. And I think the only thing about this palette is these two rainbow shades. I think we didn't really need both of them. I'm not the biggest fan of it. It's interesting to have it in here, but I think in practice it's not really ideal, and I feel like once you mix them together you're going to get a certain kind of shade. Overall, as much as I really like this color story, I really could have done without two striped shades. In 9th place is the Plain Jane Remastered palette. I had unfortunately one casualty here. This one, it did fall out, so I pressed it back in, and this was the remastered version of the originals, which those are ranking higher, and it is because I just do prefer the look and the vibe of the original of this palette, because some of these I felt were just like a little bit harder pressed. They didn't have the same level of shine and sparkle and just etherealness. Some of them were a little bit more opaque, and I just feel like overall I preferred the other palette. I still think about it, I still open it and I look at it, because every time I'm just like, I feel like it brings me back also to a certain time. I feel like it's also nostalgic, so I wish they kept a little bit more similarity with that palette. So 11, 12, 13, and 10, as well as 12 were really, really smooth, like super silky smooth. Even as shiny as they might look in the pan or when you first pick it up on the finger, I felt like they didn't put down as metallic as they kind of looked or lead you on to be. And then some of the other shades had just a little bit more texture to them. They were definitely a little bit drier, which is a huge plus because the original palette had squish to it, but there was something about those shades. They were just, even though some of these are very similar to them, they were just, there's something different about it. Like the mica is just different. I don't know how to describe it. So that's why this one is ranking lower. And then on the same note is the Remastered Hydrant palette. And this one kind of similar reasons. I wasn't the biggest fan of these kind of newer shimmers. I also haven't really wanted to reach into this palette as much. And the two mattes felt kind of like, even in the original, it felt a little out of place for me. So I feel like these were nice, but I just prefer the original. So that's why these are ranking lower. So in 7th place is the original in the Hydrant palette. And again, as I mentioned, some of these were a little bit squishy. These were also larger pans and it looked just a little bit different. I don't know, something about like, especially these shades right here, just exquisite. So beautiful. And this one's also really glowy. I think my least favorite shades were this one and this one, because this one's super dry. It's definitely more of a satin, and I just didn't really like the way that it put down. Because of the dryness, I felt like it was actually maybe almost like too dry, if that even is such a thing. So unfortunately some of the shimmers were a little bit squishy, but because they're so sheer, I tend to get away with the creasing a little bit more, because one, if they don't crease like immediately, which they didn't, and they creased later on and they were pretty sheer, it's harder to see creasing with a more sheer shade. I don't mind just tapping it out as long as it doesn't happen like within the 30 minutes. So number 6 is the Plain Jane Original palette. This is just so nostalgic, like the packaging and everything. This palette just really made me excited for Adept Cosmetics. I just love these in here. Again, super glowy. It's 7, 8, 6, 11. They're just so ethereal. I did have some creasing with these because they were definitely on the squishier side, but it wasn't anything too crazy because they are so shiny. They reflect the light. It's harder to notice the creasing versus if I was to use a more opaque shade like this one, for example, then you would definitely see the creasing a bit more. So I really enjoy these. And there's also something about this particular combination of shimmers that when I look at it, it just makes me really excited. I just still feel like there's such a great variety of different colors and tones. There's a green, there's a blue, there's a purple, pink, blue, purple, a bright pink, a pink peach. So I feel like it's a really well balanced all shimmer palette. So getting into the top 5, we have the Amy Loves Collaboration palette. I really like how cool tone this palette is because it is definitely very different for Adept Cosmetics, and I think it adds something to the brand, especially given the other color stories. So this is Amy's perfect cool tone color story. Caramel and Stunning are really high shine, super foiled, metallic, but really smooth shades, which I very much enjoy. There were 2 shades in here that were a little bit more on the squishy side, which is Pisces and Lavender, and Pisces is such a unique shade. It is so, so beautiful, but I do have to be careful where I put this on my lid, as it will definitely crease on me because how squishy it is. You can kind of see my imprint in that one. And then there's also some slightly larger particle size shades like Vibes and Glam. Like Glam especially is a little bit more similar to the shades in the top row of the Minka palette, but not quite fully at that level, but definitely a little bit chunkier. I think this is a great everyday palette that especially will make it really easy to do also like a night out look, so you can kind of go from day to night with that palette. In fourth place is the newest palette from Adept, and that is the Emo palette. And this one, they switched packaging, which you will see in another palette before this one, and it is plastic. It looks very much like Natasha Denona. Feels really nice and heavy and sturdy. Mirror super nice as well. And I'm not sure how emo this palette is. I'm not an emo expert, but I do really like the colors in here. I think it's actually a really great, more neutral palette that's got a little bit of grunge to it, especially with these kinds of almost grayish tones. And then this pale sagey green, and I love that there is a dark brown that's a little bit more neutral, and then also a black. I feel like it just creates even more variation with this kind of palette. And the shimmers in here are their newer shimmers, so none of them are overly squishy or sticky or anything like that. They have definitely a drier feel to them, and some of them have a larger particle size than others, but I love Dormant and Allure and Whisper, especially Gold Rush also. There are two hollows in here. This one, the hollow is a little bit more kind of randomly dispersed throughout it. I think this color story offers up quite a variety of different looks you could create with it, which is why it is higher up, because I just feel like it's a little bit more curated, and especially curated to kind of my preferences. The next three palettes are pretty interchangeable. I feel like it would change depending on the day, so take this with a grain of salt because I do really love all of these. So in third place is the Minka Remastered palette, and this one has the plastic cover, really nice and clean and shiny, easy to wipe off shadow, especially when you have a lot of sparkly eyeshadows. And this one, I just really love the tones in here. It is a more neutral leaning palette, but you have the extra special beautiful shimmer shadows that are not squishy, and they have a beautiful level of sparkle. Some of them are a little bit more opaque than others, and you have some pop of colors. And of course, I love me an eggplant and a lavender, so I feel like overall I just really enjoy this color story. It's a more curated color story, especially in comparison to like the Vivette palette, for example. I feel like this one to me is like easier, more user-friendly. When I open it, I know what kind of look I can create. I can do complete looks because we have midtones, lighter mattes, and deeper mattes as well. The shade Maya as well as Ava and Emma, they have just a little bit of like a thickness, almost like a little bit of waxiness to them. And Sandra, on the other hand, is super high shine, really metallic, beautiful kind of shade. So I like that you have a couple of different finishes to choose from this palette, and that is why I like it so much. And again, the mattes are really nice. In second place, which again, it could easily switch out with the first place, and that's the Unity palette. We have the beautiful lace on this one, and I just really love the assortment of the shimmers in here. With the pairing of the mattes in here, I feel like the mattes are a little bit more unexpected to kind of pair with this color story. I could have maybe done without this shade right here. Maybe it would have been a different matte, but like the shimmers are so beautiful. These are all drier and they have like a pieciness to them. They just feel really luxurious, and I love them so much. I think they look very dimensional on the lid, especially the shade Tranquility, for example, because there's blue flecks throughout it. And I just really love the assortment of all the shimmers in here. With the mattes, I feel like you can do quite a bit of different looks, especially really easy looks where you throw a matte in the crease and put a shimmer all over the lid, and the shimmer is going to look so stunning. And also being able to sheer some of these out and also build them up to be a bit more opaque is really awesome. Love Serenade, Balanced Beauty, Serene Spirit, and then you do have like a little bit of a pop going on over here, so just to spice things up a little bit. These top three palettes, actually top four palettes, are definitely palettes that I would think to reach on a day-to-day basis because I know they're easy to use. I love the shimmers. I know I can get some really beautiful shimmers on the lid and just have an easy time with the mattes. So in first place, you might already have guessed this, but it is the Flying Fiddles palette. Again, a really tough decision between this one and the Unity. This one has the same shimmers as the Unity palette, with maybe some shades that are slightly more even smoother. It does have a marbled shade in here, but I do like that it's a little bit more neutral leaning, especially when you kind of swirl it around. Could I have done without it? Yes. That being said, the reason I ultimately put this one higher than the Unity palette in this video, I feel like this green Kelly shade just kind of can spin this palette to go in a different direction, and I love that. It's just like one shade that can be used to really spice up any of these neutral shimmers. And then the other neutral mattes, I like that there's more mid-tone, a lighter, and then a deeper matte. So I feel like it's really well balanced. And on a day-to-day basis, I tend to really just use like 2 mattes, sometimes just 1 matte to do an eyeshadow wing, and then it's all about the shimmers for me. So I do really like that, and I do really enjoy all the shimmers in here. Just like I said, spectacular texture, finish, just really, really beautiful. It's a really easy color story, partially because it is so shimmer heavy, and the shimmers go really well with the matte. So super, super easy everyday looks again with this palette, and easy, almost intuitive to use. So I had to give first place to this one, but like I said, it was really, really tough between this one and the Unity palette, and even the Mink and Remastered. I'm really enjoying what they're coming out with. I love the level up in the packaging. It feels really nice and luxury, and also the formulas, not having any more squishy shadows, is definitely a huge plus for me as someone who has hooded oily lids. I don't have to worry about that with these newer shimmers. Let me know in the comments below if any of this ranking shocked you. I would love to hear your thoughts, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you next time.